I feel you touch me.
I can think of younger days when living.
They were brothers, they were legends, and together, Barry and Robin Gibb created a sound that defined a generation. Their harmonies didn't just top charts, they shaped the soundtrack of an era, but behind the music, there was silence. Not the kind you find in peaceful reflection. This was the kind that leaves an echo, an ache, a wound. For more than a year, Barry and Robin hardly spoke, not in public, not in private, not even as brothers in mourning, and the timing made it almost unthinkable. Maurice Gibb, their youngest brother, the glue between them, had just died unexpectedly. Fans assumed Barry and Robin would hold each other up through the grief. Instead, they pulled further apart. Why? What could make two brothers bound by music and loss retreat into separate worlds at the exact moment they needed each other most? Barry would one day call it his biggest regret, and in his own words, he admitted that when Robin died in February, they still hadn't truly repaired what was broken. This is the story, told only through what has been confirmed by the brothers themselves and those closest to them, of how the silence began, why it lasted, and the painful truth Barry has carried ever since. Because this isn't just a story about fame and music, it's about time and what happens when you think you. If you love uncovering the hidden human side of music legends, you're in the right place. Subscribe to RetroWaves and join us for stories that go beyond the spotlight, where the truth is raw, the emotions are real, and the greatest songs are found between the notes. By the late 1960s, the Bee Gees had become a household name. Their voices blended so perfectly, it was hard to imagine they were ever apart. But the truth was, Barry, Robin, and Maurice had already survived one major fracture. In 1969, Robin quit the Bee Gees after disagreements over who should lead the group and which songs should be released as singles. According to verified reports, Robin felt sidelined when Barry's voice was chosen to front their hit 1st of May instead of his preferred track. The rift lasted over a year before Robin returned, and the brothers carried on, seemingly putting the dispute behind them. Over the next 3 decades, they survived the highs of global fame and the lows of backlash, even weathering the decline of disco together. Through it all, they remained united, largely thanks to Maurice's ability to ease tensions and keep his older brothers focused on the bigger picture. But in January 2003, everything changed. Maurice died unexpectedly from complications related to a twisted intestine. According to Barry's own later interviews, the loss was unbearable. For Robin, it was equally devastating, and without Maurice, the balance between Barry and Robin collapsed. Instead of drawing closer, they drifted apart, confirmed by Barry himself. The two weren't really speaking in the year following Maurice's death. There were no tabloid scandals, no public fights, just distance. At family events, the conversations were brief and polite, but the closeness was gone, and as weeks turned to months, neither seemed to know how to close the gap. Was it unresolved creative tension? Was it grief pulling them in different directions? Or was it simply that without Maurice to bridge the space between them, the silence felt safer than confrontation? Whatever the cause, this period of quiet would go on to haunt Barry for the rest of his life. The relationship between Barry and Robin had always been layered, part deep brotherly bond, part artistic rivalry. Barry was the confident leader, often stepping into the role of spokesman and chief songwriter. Robin was more reserved, a man of introspection and quiet intensity, but with a voice that could break hearts in a single note. According to confirmed interviews with Barry, their differences were always there. It wasn't about one moment or one fight, it was about the way two strong, talented personalities often pulled in different directions. Maurice had been the glue, smoothing over arguments and making sure the music came first. Without him, those subtle tensions from decades earlier began to rise again. The year after Maurice's death was the hardest, as Barry explained. We just couldn't face each other. Every conversation, no matter how casual, seemed to be shadowed by the empty space where Maurice should have been. And here's the cruel truth. The longer they went without talking openly, the harder it became to start again. What might have been a simple phone call in the first weeks of grief became, over time, an unspoken standoff. Neither man ever publicly confirmed a dramatic argument during this period. According to those who knew them, it was less about anger and more about paralysis. They didn't know how to step back into the closeness they'd had, and the world was starting to notice. In the months following Maurice's funeral, fans noticed that Barry and Robin weren't appearing together. Robin began performing solo at charity events and TV specials, often speaking about his hopes for future music. Barry, meanwhile, retreated from public life, focusing on his health and family. According to verified reports, Barry was dealing with arthritis and chronic back problems, making the idea of touring physically painful. Robin, on the other hand, seemed determined to keep working, perhaps as a way to cope with his grief. This difference in approach created even more distance, not in words, but in worlds. The media began speculating about whether the Bee Gees were finished. Neither Barry nor Robin gave a definitive answer. In one interview, Robin said he hoped they could work together again, but his tone left room for doubt. Barry at the time remained silent. Some music journalists suggested there might have been creative disagreements about how to move forward without Maurice, but this was never confirmed by either brother. What is confirmed, from Barry's own later statements, is that they simply couldn't face making decisions about the Bee Gees at all during that period. For fans, the image of the three brothers together was essential to the Bee Gees' identity. Without Maurice, and with Barry and Robin apart, the brand felt incomplete, and while the public was speculating, privately the gap between the brothers was solidifying into something neither could easily cross. Still, fate would soon bring them into the same room again, but not even that would mend the wound entirely. By late 2004, an invitation arrived that should have been a healing moment. Barry and Robin were to be honored together for their contributions to music. For the first time in over a year, they would stand side by side on stage. According to confirmed accounts, they accepted, but Barry later admitted, "We weren't really speaking." They smiled for cameras, shook hands with dignitaries, accepted the awards, then went their separate ways again. It wasn't anger, it wasn't hostility, it was a polite, careful distance. Conversations were short. The easy laughter they once shared was gone. Part of the problem was circumstance. Verified reports show that Barry's health was declining at the time. Chronic back pain and arthritis limited his ability to perform, while Robin continued touring and appearing in public. This created two very different day-to-day realities, one brother still in the spotlight, the other living quietly in recovery. They did come together in 2006 for a BBC documentary about the Bee Gees. In it, they spoke warmly about their shared history, but careful viewers noticed Barry and Robin were rarely shown in the same shot. The reunion had been possible, but it was fragile, and the cracks beneath the surface were still there, waiting for the next test. That test came in the form of something far more serious than music: illness. In 2010, Robin Gibb's health began to falter. At first, it was just unexplained stomach pains, but as months passed, doctors confirmed something far more serious: colorectal cancer, which later spread to his liver. According to verified reports, Robin kept performing in the early stages of his treatment, appearing gaunt but determined. For Barry, hearing the diagnosis was like having the ground pulled from under him. Whatever disagreements they'd had suddenly felt irrelevant. The two began speaking more often. Barry visited. There were phone calls, quiet moments, private jokes. The silence that had once defined their relationship began to lift, but cautiously. Barry later admitted they never had the big conversation that could clear the air completely. Why not? According to Barry's own words, they didn't want to revisit the hurt. With time running out, they both seemed to choose peace over painful truth. For Robin, work remained a focus. He continued recording and even appeared in public events during treatment. Barry, while supportive, kept a lower profile, often behind the scenes. The thaw in their relationship was real, but the clock was ticking faster than either of them wanted to admit. Robin's final public performance came in February 2012. He appeared visibly weakened, but his voice still carried the haunting tone fans had loved for decades. Barry was not on stage, but according to confirmed reports, they were in contact privately during this time. Just months later, Robin's condition worsened sharply. Barry visited him in the hospital, describing those visits later as incredibly hard. They shared moments that didn't need words. A hand held, a look exchanged. According to multiple verified accounts, Barry was by Robin's bedside in his last days. There was no dramatic reconciliation speech, no staged closure, just two brothers sitting together in the quiet, aware of everything that had been left unsaid. On May 20, 2012, Robin Gibb died at the age of 62. For Barry, the loss wasn't only the end of a sibling bond, it was the end of the possibility to make things right in the way he'd always imagined. At Robin's funeral, Barry delivered a eulogy that was both tender and devastating. According to verified transcripts of that day, he told the mourners, "We were laughing all the way, sometimes crying, and even right up to the end, we found conflict with each other, which now means nothing. It just means nothing." It was as close as Barry would come to a public confession of regret. The conflicts that had kept them apart for over a year seemed so small now, and yet those months, that lost time, could never be recovered. In later interviews, Barry's words became even sharper. In the 2020 HBO documentary How Can You Mend a Broken Heart, he said, "My greatest regret is that every brother I lost, we weren't getting on at the time." For Barry, the silence between him and Robin was a reminder that no amount of history, no shared stage, no Grammy Awards could protect against the human tendency to let time slip away without saying the things that matter most. And now, Barry stood as the last surviving BG. The funeral was the breaking point. For Barry, this was where the weight of the silence came crashing down. When Maurice had died in 2003, Barry had thought deep down that he and Robin would reconnect eventually. He believed there would be a tour, an album, or even just a phone call that would restore their bond. But when Robin fell ill, that hope turned into urgency. And yet the conversation they both knew they needed never happened. Standing in front of Robin's casket, Barry felt the truth in its rawest form. The one thing they could never get back was time. In that moment, the year of silence wasn't just a memory, it was a wound. And it would remain a wound, because now there was no chance to fix it. Barry's later reflections make it clear, their silence had never been about hatred. It was about two men shaped by the same past, but burdened by different ways of carrying it. It was about grief, and about the very human fear of opening old scars. But now, it didn't matter. The bridge between them was gone forever. So why didn't Barry and Robin speak for over a year? According to confirmed reports and Barry's own words, it wasn't one dramatic fight. It was the slow accumulation of differences, creative, personal, and emotional, combined with the shock of losing Maurice, their anchor. It was two grieving brothers retreating into themselves, each trying to cope in his own way. Barry has admitted that his greatest regret was letting that silence last as long as it did. He has also said that if he could change one thing, it would be to have spoken more openly with Robin during that year. In the years since Robin's passing, Barry has honored his brothers through music, tribute performances, and candid interviews. But the lesson he's carried forward is simple. Tell people what they mean to you now. Don't wait. Because even for brothers who spent their lives in harmony, silence can be the loudest thing you leave behind. This wasn't just a story about the Bee Gees. It was a story about love, loss, and the time we never get back. If this moved you, share it with someone you care about. And before the day ends, tell them what they mean to you. Subscribe to RetroWaves for more true stories that live beyond the music, because sometimes the most powerful songs are the ones we never get to sing again.